Welcome. I'm Nathaniel Evans, Adjunct Professor at Utah Valley University. And on behalf of the Utah Valley University's Plan Giving Department, we're thrilled to host this online workshop focused on legacy planning. As Utah's largest public university, Utah Valley University is committed to serving the community through accessible education and student success. We appreciate the community members and alumni who serve our students. We hope this workshop will help inform you and inspire you as you look forward to and plan your family legacy. This seminar is part of a series focused on important financial topics presented by seasoned professionals in estate planning, taxation, finance, and investment management. Many of our presenters serve on Utah Valley University's Gift Planning Advancement Board that encourages and enhances engagement and philanthropy at our university. During this webinar, your video and audio features are disabled to create a focused learning environment. At this time, I'm honored to introduce our esteemed presenter, John Unice, an expert in legacy planning who will provide you with valuable insights. We hope that participating in these seminars will equip you with knowledge and practical strategies to help you prepare for a confident and peaceful future with your chosen financial professional. Get ready to embark on this transformative journey with us. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope you find value in the information presented today. Please know, the Utah Valley University Plan Giving Department facilitates this ongoing series of informative webinars on retirement planning, estate planning, and family-owned business transition planning presented by financial professionals. The content of each presentation is offered as a public service and is informational only. UVU makes no claims as to its accuracy or value to participants, nor does it endorse any of the presenting professionals, their organization, products, or service. When making financial decisions, participants should seek guidance from their preferred financial advisor.
Thank you, Nathaniel. Welcome to 6 Steps to Legacy Planning for Generations. I'm sure you'll know at least one of these two people, the fellow on your right. But you may not know the man on the left. He's famous for delivering a talk based on answering this question. What wisdom would you try to impart to the world if you knew it was your last chance? His name is Randy Pausch, a father, a husband, and a computer scientist at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. Randy had already been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer when he was asked to give an open quote last lecture, close quote, one in a series where professors imagine what they would talk about in their final lesson. Most professors don't deliver one under such pressing circumstances, which made his lecture even more compelling. His talk to his students at his school was recorded. It became a YouTube sensation, and soon he was on Oprah and Good Morning America. And then he finally came out with a book called Last Lecture. Randy's story is remarkable, partly because it showed great human resilience in the face of personal tragedy. He knew his time on earth was limited. He knew the day he would die, as he said, would be like pushing his family off a cliff. So he set out, while still strong, to do what he could to build a net that would catch them and cushion the blow of his departure. I've picked a few of his notable quotes from his lecture and his book. Here's the first. The key question to keep asking is, are you spending your time on the right things? Because time is all you have. Be prepared. Luck is truly where preparation meets opportunity. And finally, to be cliche, death is a part of life, and it's going to happen to all of us. I have the blessing of getting a little bit of advance notice, and I am able to optimize my use of time down the home stretch. Randy died quietly at home in July of 2008, about 10 months after he gave his last lecture. He was surrounded by his family. I think it's safe to say that he left his family and his children and the world with a deep personal message about his values, his belief, and his wisdoms. And not just for his wife and children, but really also his children's children. The chain of generations we all have a link in. I think you could say that if someone had a good death, it certainly was Randy Pausch. The details of Randy's death stand in contrast to those of this man, the actor and producer James Gandolfini. You may remember him as Tony Soprano, the mafia crime boss and lead character in the HBO hit series The Sopranos. Unlike Randy Pausch, James Gandolfini died suddenly at age 51 while on a trip to Italy. It was a shock to his fans and his family. No one saw it coming. Unfortunately, he hadn't done a thorough job of planning his affairs. He left 80% of his estate to his sisters and daughter in such a way that it triggered a painful $30 million tax bill. And unlike Randy Pausch, James Gandolfini didn't get to play a role in writing his final legacy. Instead, his ending had a strong resemblance to the controversial last scene of The Sopranos. If you were a fan, you may remember it. Tony arranges to meet his family for dinner at a local diner. First, his wife Carmela arrives, then his son AJ. Tony orders fried onion rings for the table while they wait for his daughter, Meadow. And Tony keeps looking at the door, checking for his daughter's arrival. The camera jump cuts to the daughter outside trying to park her car, and then back to Tony. Then back to the daughter and back to Tony. The tension is building. He keeps looking up, and we're all wondering who's going to come in the door, Meadow or a mafia hitman? And then, finally, the screen goes black. The finale to the 6-season series ends with the storyline unresolved. No deathbed scene, no final words, just a jarring cut to black, just as James Gandolfini's real life ended. So, in the opposite manner of Randy Pausch, James Gandolfini didn't get to write his story for the ages. I hope you can see in our little tale of two families here a hint of the topics we're going to touch on today, namely the importance and seriousness of thinking through, developing, and implementing your legacy and planning for the next generation. It is never too soon to do that. So now, before we go on, I just wanted to stop and take a second to formally introduce myself. My name is John Unice. I am a founding partner of Keeler Thomas Management, LLC, the Family and Enterprise Solutions Company. We have been serving families and family-owned businesses for over 43 years. Our mission is to give our families the gift of time and then guide them to attain what matters most to them. The legacy planning we will discuss today is a foundational part of the services we provide. So I welcome you to today's presentation, and I thank you for coming and taking the time and committing the time to learn more about legacy planning for the next generation. You may be wondering why a financial professional is up here today talking about legacy planning for the generations. Well, as I mentioned earlier, this is a foundational piece of our service to our clients and to our community. This became a foundational piece of our service because early on in our history, we saw and still continue to see some difficult, unhappy situations when families don't think about and proactively deal with these issues. When no legacy planning is done, we see a range of unhappy outcomes that often impact multiple generations. We'll talk about more of those in a moment. Of course, we don't want that to happen to you and your family, so that's why we do this presentation. Before we end today, I will give you some links that will give you more information about legacy planning that you can explore at home and apply to yourselves to help you remember everything that we cover today. I'll also extend an invitation to you to start developing your own legacy plan for your family, and I'll tell you about that in just a little while. When it comes to today's topic, it's not the stuffy old version of traditional estate planning. Instead, we see legacy planning in a broader, much broader, and more positive light that will help you find meaning in your life now and make sure it counts for something to your loved ones who will stay behind just a little bit longer. As we saw with Randy Pausch in the last lecture, he recounted his childhood dreams, the outstanding people he met in his lifetime, and the lessons he learned along the way. The lecture has been read and seen by millions of people. Now, that's a legacy. Yours may not be as far-reaching, but it will be just, perhaps even more meaningful to your own family, and more so because it's yours. So let's continue with trying to understand the seriousness of the problem many families face here, and then look at some solutions that can start to help you and your family avoid the worst kinds of results. We can see here one aspect of the problem we faced. Many people haven't thought through how they want their money and estate handled after they're gone. They think they have plenty of time. I mean, what could go wrong? And not reflected here are people who have given it some thought, but did not take action formally to put their plan in place. But things do go wrong. What would happen if you died before you got everything set up? What would it mean to your loved ones if you died tomorrow before you had a chance to tell them you loved them, much less write a will or start writing down your memories? Terrible thought, right? Well, let's just consider what could happen in the aftermath of an untimely death. Or your family is left grieving and in the dark about what you own, where everything is, and what your wishes are. Think about your closest next of kin, your spouse or your children, or both. First, they're in shock to learn of your untimely death. When they start going through your papers, what will they find? A neat folder marked "Open in case of my death" with all of your assets listed and your wishes clearly spelled out? Or it will be a hodgepodge of papers that make no sense to anyone but you, and now you're gone? Add to that your estate planning documents are missing, incomplete, or in conflict with one another. Perhaps you never got around to making a will, so no one knows who you want your assets to go to. Or, if you did sign a will, maybe it conflicts with your beneficiary designation on your retirement plan or your life insurance policy. This happens. For example, people update their will when they get remarried, but forget to update their IRA and other investment beneficiary designations, which still list the former spouse. So let me ask you, if you died tomorrow, how would your assets be distributed? Do you know? Family members start arguing over what they believe you would have wanted. Granted, you're not around to see the turmoil, but I'm asking you to imagine it now. Without clear instructions from you, what would your family members say to one another? Would there be arguments over what you would have wanted? You may have heard of normal, loving families who turned on one another after a parent died without a will. It can bring out the worst in people. Now, if there is no will, the estate goes into probate. If there is a will but no trust, the estate still goes into probate. If there is no will, the court takes over and divides the assets based on state law. If there is a will, the court takes over to decide if the will is valid or not. This may or may not be what you want. Probate fees are deducted from your estate, leaving less for your heirs. If you were to die tomorrow, do you know if your estate would owe taxes? Perhaps one of the worst things to contemplate about sudden death is leaving special sentiments unsaid. There are people who say "I love you" at the end of every phone conversation just to make sure it's the last thing said if they get hit by a bus. But that doesn't really do the job of telling your spouse, your children, your grandchildren how you truly feel about them. So let me ask you, if you died tomorrow, what things will you wish you had said to the people you love? In the absence of a legacy plan, the impact of your life is diminished. Between the confusion, family squabbles, messy estate planning, and all the things you wish you'd said but didn't, your legacy comes up short. The aftermath of your death is not nearly as positive as it could have been. Well, what else could go wrong? How about this one? For some, a fate worse than death is sudden incapacity. If you suffer a stroke, rather than dying, you end up in a coma. In some ways, this is worse than dying unprepared because you must go on living. So, who will make decisions about your care? Someone you love and trust? Or will you be at the mercy of someone you don't even know because you didn't set things up properly? Without formal advanced planning, your medical wishes are not honored because no one knows what they are. Hospitals are obligated to do whatever is necessary to keep people alive, even if it involves ventilators and feeding tubes. Proper planning puts the control of that back into your hands, the hands of a loved one, or someone that you trust. To have these benefits, you must set it up now while you are still of sound mind and body. And here's what else. Your money's frozen. Your bills go unpaid. Your investments are left unattended because you didn't formally appoint a trusted person to act on your behalf. No one else has the authority to transfer money or pay bills or do anything with your finances as long as you're incapacitated. Here's why this happens. People often equate estate planning with death planning. That perspective is at best unpleasant and perhaps even scary. Therefore, many block it out and never do anything, or they don't do enough. The quote here sums it up. One of the greatest obstacles in estate planning is the perpetuating of death denial. Most people don't want to plan for post-death lives because death is a scary topic to even think about. Now, this is true on a financial level, but also, and probably more importantly, on an emotional and spiritual level. The lifetime of experiences, hard-earned wisdom, and insight that make up your values never get discussed and never get passed on. And that's the biggest loss for everyone, particularly those in the generations to come. You may be thinking, well, my family knows how I feel about them, and I'm not a best-selling author or a Hollywood movie star with tens of millions in the bank. So what does it matter if I don't take this issue seriously? What are the consequences? The consequences of having no estate plan are tragic. As Lawrence Greenberg notes here, heirs may be subjected to a number of obstacles, such as probate, creditors, lawsuits, judgments, and legal fees, all of which can compromise the value of the legacy. Common problems that arise when there is no estate plan include: if you're incapacitated, your money's frozen, your medical desires may be unknown, and your medical desires may not be followed. If you pass away without an estate plan, guardianship of your children will be appointed by the courts. Courts decide how to distribute your assets. Family discord arises through the distribution of assets. There is no tax planning. You pay unnecessary legal fees and taxes. Settlement delays cause financial delays and strains, because they create cash shortages for survivors. Also, sometimes decisions are not communicated to the next generation. Details are not revealed until after death. Family tensions arise after the will is read. And also sometimes there's just a reluctance to make a plan or update a plan. It's not really a good picture, right? Now that's why attorneys, accountants, financial professionals who've been pressing their clients for years to do estate planning. In reality, estate planning does much more than death and distribution planning. Here are the things estate planning can and should deal with. Number one, an uninterrupted continuation of your financial affairs if you decide you don't want to, or you can't, or are unable to do so yourself. Protection of assets from creditors, and avoidance of unnecessary taxes and legal fees. Number 3, the distribution of assets in life or after death in a way that you believe will bless the life of each individual heir. The preservation of relationships and connections of those you love. Privacy, keeping your financial and personal affairs out of the public eye. Supporting people, causes, and/or organizations you believe in, and preparing heirs now for their inheritance. And finding a way to preserve your family's unique identity and the values that drive it. But traditional estate planning doesn't capture the fullness of our lives or our values. So, what's missing are the intangible assets that we've collected, often the fruits of a life well lived. They include 2 types of things not included in traditional estate planning, such as character assets, your values, health, spirituality, heritage, purpose, life experiences, talents, and plans for giving, and your intellectual assets, your business systems, alliances, ideas, skills, traditions, reputation, and wisdom. Now, you're saying to yourself, possibly, this is a grim picture. We don't want that to happen in our family. Is there a way to achieve all these things, not just the nuts and bolts of traditional estate planning? The answer is yes. It's called generational planning, the second half of a good legacy plan. And it recognizes that we are all much more than just our physical assets for our estate plan. So here's the definition of generational planning. Generational planning is a modern, intentional, and by the way, even can be fun, process that builds upon your estate planning and helps you pay forward your legacy. So legacy planning has 2 objectives. The first objective is estate planning, a process for passing on a family's tangible wealth and assets. The second objective, sorry, I stumble over my words sometimes. My mind goes faster than my mouth. Second objective is generational planning, a process for passing on a family's intangible wealth and preserving family unity into the next generation, perhaps even to multiple generations in the future. Both are done to help you leave a lasting legacy for your family. And so, in thinking about the people closest to you, here are some thoughts and key considerations to a successful generational plan in your legacy plan. First, consider your spouse. If you were to die first, you need to ensure sufficient income for the rest of your spouse's life, maybe through insurance or just making sure there are enough assets to draw from. Now, that's actually part of your estate plan, but here's the second piece. You also want to make sure that whichever of you goes first, the surviving spouse would be able to manage the finances alone. You know, we see this in many cases where husband makes the investment decision and wives pay the bills. This is a natural division of labor in a marriage, and so they rely on one another and each does what they do best, but then one of them dies and the other must take over without having been trained to do so. So, in a successful generational plan, a married couple, while they're both alive, plan ahead and make sure that either spouse can carry on and manage the finances regardless of which spouse goes first. Now, children need to be prepared for their inheritance. We've all heard stories about trust fund babies and inheritors who have no appreciation or respect for the money that was left to them. In fact, multi-generational studies show that slightly over 90% of families lose their wealth and their unity by the time the third generation from the wealth builders passes away. Williams and Presser, authors of the book Preparing Heirs, conducted a 25-year study of families who defined themselves to be among the 90% who failed. They surveyed 3,250 of these families asking this question: what caused your family to lose their wealth and unity? Now, of all 3,250 families, the most common responses by percentage are 60% said it was due to a lack of communication and trust. 25% said that the heirs were not prepared for the stewardship of the wealth. 10% said a lack of shared common or compelling vision for the future of the family. If approximately 90% failed, that means approximately 10% succeeded. A very powerful question to consider is, what did the successful 10% do to create that success? There are several studies that examine this side of the question. Dennis Jaffe, the Merrill Lynch Center for Family Wealth, and the Heritage Institute, and others studied families who succeeded staying together and keeping their wealth. These families also have common responses when questioned about how they succeeded. Not surprisingly, the answers include the following. Each family had a formal organization providing a forum to 1. Teach and train effective communication and conflict resolution skills. 2. Mentor and prepare the next generation for the stewardship of the wealth of the family using effective pre-inheritance experiences. 3. They created and adjust a compelling shared vision for the future of the family. And 4. Identify and preserve the unique identity of the family by keeping the history, stories, and lessons of the family past and present. Now, these studies confirm the reason for which we have observed historically these results in society. Well, here's the result. Without formal structure and intentional guidance, the heir's tendency is to spend it rather than preserving it for their own future or for future generations. Now, of even greater value to your children and grandchildren is the sharing and paying forward the unique identity of your family, which is embedded in the family history, family legends, and family stories. That history, those legends, and those stories illustrate how you lived and what you lived for. Each family's identity is as unique as a human fingerprint, meaning the combination of the history, legends, and stories of your family is never duplicated. A study referenced in Reader's Digest described the difference between students who performed well under pressure and those that did not do as well. The difference between those who did well and those who didn't do as well was those who did do well knew their family stories. As a result, they had an identity to live up to beyond just themselves. Now, going on past that, sometimes it's easier, by the way, to skip a generation when passing on these stories. Grandchildren usually have a greater appreciation than children for what life was like when you were young and what you learned from your experiences. So seize the opportunity now to start sharing family stories and conveying some of those memories and values that you grew up with. Now, and finally, think about all the people you've touched in your life. Think about the causes you care about, the organizations that are doing good work in the world and that you contribute to now. Maybe you'd like to leave something to them so they can continue those good works. And naturally, you may be saying to yourself, okay, this makes sense, but how can I do this in a way that is not overwhelming, complicated, or extremely expensive? Well, you don't have to be overwhelmed. We simply follow a 6-step legacy planning process to start leaving your mark for the next generation. Let me take you through a quick overview of these 6 steps. Part 1 involves planning for incapacity. We like to get this out of the way first because it's so essential and it's relatively easy to do. Incapacity planning is so easy, it's surprising that everyone hasn't done it. People of all ages should do it because an accident or a stroke or a sudden serious illness can happen to anyone at any time. There are forms for this. For health care, all you have to do is state a few simple wishes about how you would want to be cared for, and name a person to interact with doctors and make clinical decisions or medical decisions on your behalf. This may be your spouse or one of your children or a close friend. In the state of Utah, for those of you who are viewing this here, there's a form that the state has prepared and that you can find online to accomplish this very thing. For finances, you would simply sign a power of attorney or a limited power of attorney, giving another person legal authority to act on your behalf. This would allow them to pay bills, transfer money, and do what's needed to keep your finances in order during the time you are unable to do so yourself. Again, it can be a spouse, an adult child, a close friend, or even a trusted professional. Best practice is to choose your spouse until you can establish a trust. We'll discuss that in just a minute. You must be competent, legally competent, to sign these forms, which is why we want you to do it now. This is step 1 of savvy legacy planning. Once you have checked this off, you'll feel much better, and then you'll be ready to tackle step 2. Step 2 is to get organized. Now, you may know, I know you've probably been meaning to do this if you haven't, or maybe you've already pretty well organized yourself. Whatever the status of your organization is, it's critical that it would make sense to your loved ones if you suddenly weren't around anymore. Your objective in this step is to prepare for the real business of estate planning. First, you will need to identify all the property you own and what it's worth. This includes all your savings accounts, investment accounts, retirement accounts, real estate, business interests, significant personal property like jewelry and artwork, everything. Before you ever sit down with an attorney to have your estate planning documents drafted, you will need to have this list. Another reason to do this is to determine if your estate will be subject to estate taxes. If it is, that is, if the total value of your estate exceeds the estate tax exemption amount. Got through it, sorry. You will want to talk to your attorney about some of the legal ways to reduce or avoid estate taxes. If you were to go on the internet, you could read about many celebrities who didn't do the proper planning and whose estates owed millions of dollars in estate taxes that really could have been avoided. If you don't read about a particular celebrity's estate plan, it means they did it right. They set up a trust that both saved the estate taxes and kept their affairs private. Now, of course, you want to make things easy on your spouse or children. Make it so they have access to your important papers and passwords. Help them know what to do first, like take care of your pets or get the mail or whatever. In a non-legally binding letter, sometimes we refer to this as a letter of wishes, to your survivors, you can say anything you want. You can give funeral instructions. You can tell them what you want done with your Facebook account. Tell them where the key to your home safe is. Anything. We can help you with this. In part 3, you'll be thinking about the people you love and the causes you care about. This is in preparation for part 4, which is the real business of estate planning. Make a list of each of the individuals and organizations you wish to benefit. Now, speaking of causes you care about, I'd like to highlight UVU's Evergreen campaign. This campaign was started in 2018 and has since flourished, raising over $201 million from more than 28,000 donors, including 7,200 alumni. The ambitious goal of $350 million is transforming education by enhancing academic programs, supporting specialized centers, boosting athletics, and providing essential scholarships. As you plan your legacy, philanthropic donations to funds like the Evergreen Campaign are great opportunities to make a lasting impact in student success and in the community. Now, for some of you, part 3 will be easy. You will want to leave everything to your spouse, and you may have 1 or 2 favorite charities that you want to support. But you have to think about these contingencies. What should happen with your assets at the time your spouse passes away? Assuming you pass away first. What if your spouse goes before you do? In either case, do you want everything to go to your kids, divided equally among them, or distributed according to need? And what about your grandchildren? What about other relatives or friends you may want part of your estate or some of your prized possessions to go to? An easier way to decide what happens after the survivor of you and your spouse passes away is to assume you both pass away this year. Now you can focus on your children and or your grandchildren's current situations and how you can use their inheritance to bless their lives best. As time goes on, children and grandchildren grow and change. You should count on making changes to your plan periodically to stay relevant to your family's changing circumstances. And what if you have special situations? For example, a child who you don't feel is ready to handle an inheritance, or even a special needs child who would lose out on medical benefits if there were a large inheritance. Are these children or grandchildren best served by a receipt of a lump sum or a stream of payments? These are all things that need to be considered before you start working on your estate planning documents. The more you have thought through your family and charitable wishes, the more efficient the estate planning process will be, and the more money you will save in legal fees. Now, also in this important step, this important process of preparing beneficiaries for their inheritance, you should consider the followings. Now, some families may want to be completely open about who's going to get what, while others may prefer to be more secretive to avoid family battles. If there are going to be battles, or you suspect there are going to be battles, maybe it's better to have those family battles while you're still around to mediate. In any case, you want the people who will be inheriting your assets to know how to manage them and to carry on your intent to preserve and grow the assets and not spend them on frivolous things or lose them to taxes. This is the time to talk to your spouse and kids about what they might get if you die, and to give them some lessons on how to manage their inheritance. This will be an extremely valuable part of your legacy. Now we get to the traditional part of estate planning. All those decisions you made in part 3 about who should get what will now need to be legalized. That is, there will need to be a mechanism to transfer those assets to your loved ones in a legal manner, so let's look at that. Now, this isn't always done via a will. In fact, if you use a will to transfer assets, the assets transferred by the will must be probated in order to transfer them to the beneficiaries, or for the transfer to be completed. This can be costly in time and money. Sometimes you can transfer assets through account titling. If you hold title as joint tenants with rights of survivorship, and if one joint tenant dies, the property will automatically transfer to the other joint tenant without going through probate. However, important thing to know, if you add an heir to the title of your property as a joint tenant, particularly in real estate, your heir's creditors can now lay claim to your property. That can have tragic consequences. Moreover, if you add an heir as a joint tenant to your property, you create a gift tax event where gift taxes could be due. Transferring property this way, except between spouses, is rarely a safe idea. Another way is through beneficiary designations. For example, if you have an IRA, you signed a beneficiary designation form in which you named the person or persons who should inherit the IRA if you die. This allows the asset to pass, or the IRA to pass directly to the beneficiary outside of probate, regardless of what your will says. Now, this may or may not create the result you want. This should be reviewed carefully with your advisor and your attorney. There are several legal ways to transfer assets to loved ones after death. But whatever you choose, they all must be coordinated. You may have some accounts titled jointly. You may have some signed beneficiary designations. Having said all that, the most efficient, private, and cost-effective way to transfer assets, provide for incapacity, avoid taxes, and avoid claims from your heirs' creditors is to establish a living, revocable trust and then transfer title to your assets to the trust. In certain cases, certainly not all, you may wish the trust to become the beneficiary of your assets that currently have beneficiaries designated, like life insurance policies and certain bank accounts, etc. Do not, repeat, do not make the revocable living trust the beneficiary of your IRAs or other retirement accounts except under the guidance of your attorney. You will need a pour-over will as well to pick up any assets not titled to your trust, then probate them and transfer them to your trust for distribution. Now, some people's estate plans are very simple. Other people need more detailed legal advice. We can help you make that determination and refer you to an estate planning attorney when we get to this stage of the process. Or, if you have an attorney you already work with, we will work with that attorney to coordinate things on our end, such as making sure your accounts are titled properly. Depending on how much thought you have given to your beneficiaries in Part 3, this step should be pretty quick and straightforward. It's a matter of executing the wishes you've already identified in Step 3. Laying all this groundwork in Part 3 will also save on legal fees. At the same time, you don't want to rush anything. Talking with us, your advisor, and your attorney can sometimes make you aware of possibilities you didn't know about before, such as planning for contingencies or drafting the documents so they can't be contested, and so on. Good attorneys definitely earn their fees. Now we get to the fun part, creating your family legacy. This is where you really make your life count for something by leaving behind a piece of yourself. How to do this will be up to you. Now, we have worksheets and guidelines that can get you started. For example, if you're interested in keeping your wealth and family unity into future generations, we can provide you with a self-assessment to help you discover your family's readiness to do that. Conversely, you might start by simply capturing memories and writing down certain thoughts, such as what you want your children and grandchildren to know about you. You may be planning to compile a family photo album or a family recipes book to hand down. Maybe you have a special skill, such as gardening, woodworking, that you would like to pass on to certain family members. The point is, now is the time to start thinking about these intangible assets that will make your legacy so valuable to your family. Now, Part 6 comes later, but it's no less essential than Parts 1 through 5. It's great that you're doing all this planning early, long before you plan to leave this earth, but that means a lot can happen between now and then. So, you'll need to keep an eye on your plan and on your family and revise your plan according to your family circumstances or as things change. Your plan is not set in stone. As your family composition changes, you will want to revisit it. Whenever there's a marriage, a divorce, a death, or birth of a child, you will want to take a look at your plan. Or you might change your mind about something. You can always amend your documents for any reason at all. Remember that having the wrong people inherit your money is almost worse than no estate plan at all. Now, that's our 6-part legacy planning process. We're getting close to finishing, so let's review briefly. We started by looking at the differences between the Randy Pausch story and the James Gandolfini story. The key takeaway there was that your legacy is going to be written no matter what, for better or for worse. So let's make sure we control the final narrative of our life, because things can happen suddenly, death or incapacity. And we saw the consequences of not being prepared, the pain, confusion, and anger among family members left behind. Then we were introduced to the concept of generational planning and saw how it differs from traditional estate planning. And that led us to the understanding that the first step in generational planning is to ensure that our tangible wealth and assets get to the right people or organizations. And then to do that, we've just introduced you to the 6 major steps in generational planning. And as you look at those six steps, you're possibly thinking that sounds like a lot to achieve. Well, in fact, it is. But what we found over the years is that when we work together and guide people through the generational planning process, they experience 2 things. Number 1 is relief. Great relief that it's done. And in many cases, having it done has been shown to prolong life. The second is a new excitement and renewed energy to focus on the non-financial or intangible aspects of generational planning. This is the reflective part. It's not legal and it's not business. It's the part where we get to look back on our personal journey and share the stories that we carry in our hearts. This is our gift to the next generation. It can be in words or stories or pictures or actions. It can provide hope. It may even provide healing. But just as important are the things we say and do that bring us meaning, because we recognize that we are the carriers of wisdom for our family. And from generation to generation, each of us is a link in the chain that binds our families together. And that link is the mark we leave, our legacy. And that's why I think many of you are here today, and why I'd like to make a suggestion. Let's work together. Hopefully you are all motivated now to get started on your legacy plan. So let's maintain the motivation by taking action. Here's the idea. Working together, we will develop a plan for doing the many things that need to be done. One of the reasons people don't get around to estate planning is that the task seems overwhelming and they don't know where to start. So we would like to break it into chunks for you, where we set some goals and establish a timetable for implementing them. For example, in week 1, you might sign your healthcare directive. In week 2, you might sign a power of attorney for financial decisions. We have a checklist of the things that need to be done to get your plan in order, and together we can go through that list and check things off as they are completed. Working together, we will help you stay on track. We can also share resources. If you need a referral to an estate planning attorney or a tax advisor, we can introduce you to some of the professionals we work with and whose work over the years has proven effective. We know they're good at what they do. By working together, we can hold each other accountable. We'll have frequent check-ins and deadline dates for getting things done. This is all for your benefit and to keep you motivated and engaged, so you will carry through and carry out your plans. And we have a way for you to start even right now. Imagine how you will feel when your legacy is all set. A trusted person is ready to step in and help with healthcare decisions or financial dealings if it becomes necessary. Your records are all organized and accessible to your loved ones. Your spouse and other loved ones will be provided for after your death. By leaving behind both tangible and intangible assets, you will be remembered for your unique contributions to your family and to the world. Legacy planning is not hard, you just have to get started. So let's work together. In gratitude for the time you've spent with us today, we are making available our generational planning brochure and legacy planning readiness assessment without charge. The generational planning brochure lays out the characteristics and steps the successful 10% of families have used to keep their family's unity and their family's wealth together for multiple generations. A link to the brochure will be made available to you by email one day following the webinar. Just follow the links in the email to access your free brochure. The Legacy Planning Readiness Assessment allows you to measure where you are in both estate planning and generational planning. You can take this assessment in the privacy of your own home. We suggest that each spouse do the assessment individually / separately. Then, come together and compare answers. The ensuing discussion will open whole new possibilities for your family. A link to that assessment will be made available to you by the email that we mentioned earlier, one day following the webinar. Just follow the links to access your free brochure and your personal assessment. You may also access the assessment by visiting our webpage, www.keelerthomas.com, and click the resources link and then assessments, as you can see from this screen here. After clicking assessments, please select Get Started under the Legacy Pathway Assessment. Finally, if you feel like you would like more help, UVU has graciously made available to you a 1-hour complimentary consultation with Keeler Thomas Management Advisors. You can indicate your interest at the conclusion of the meeting by completing the follow-up survey or by visiting our webpage, www.keelerthomas.com, and scheduling a meeting at your convenience. Just click the Let's Meet button and you'll be brought to a page where you can select a date and time at your convenience. As you prepare for the meeting, you can get specific answers to your questions regarding your unique situation. Thank you for watching. I wish you all the best in your efforts to plan for yourselves, your families, and future generations.